You're listening to Scribble Talk, a podcast for bid and proposal professionals. My name is Bhaskar Sundaram, and with my co-host Ashley Case, we will be sitting down with our industry veterans to share their stories, discuss their career, and learn how to make an impact in the industry. Today's guest is Jon Williams. Jon Williams is the UK Managing Director of Strategic Proposals. He holds the unique status of being a fellow of each of APMP, the Institute of Sales Management, and the Royal Society of Arts. In over 20 years in proposals, he's worked with sales organizations in more than 30 countries, helping them to radically improve their win rates. Jon's published numerous research white reports and is a regular keynote speaker at conferences around the world. He's the co-author with BJ Lownie of best-selling book Proposal Essentials and is recognized for his passionate for all things proposals. Welcome, Jon, to Scribble Talk. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me, Bhaskar. I'm amused that in the introduction you used the word veteran. You make me feel very old describing me as a veteran. So I should try and keep a youthful aspect to the conversation.
Of course, Jon. Of course. It's the wealth of wisdom that you have given us, Jon, in the shortest span of time. Let's put it that way. Jon, let's go back to the very beginning, Jon. Where were you born? And let's talk more about your early life, high school education.
So in terms of where I was born, I'm very lucky. I come from the greatest city in the world, which is Liverpool in England. I guess we're famous for a couple of things. We're famous for music. My dad was at school with Paul McCartney. He was a friend of McCartney's. We've still got the kind of framed school photo with my dad standing next to Paul McCartney. And as I was growing up there in the early 80s, there was a really thriving music scene in Liverpool. And the other thing is we're famous for having the world's greatest soccer team. So I'm a passionate supporter of Liverpool Football Club. And as a city, it's just a remarkable place. It has an amazing history of having been one of the world's great port cities and great trading cities. So very international in outlook, very multicultural. But then, fell into really sharp decline and some quite serious urban poverty. Sort of 70s and 80s, and I'm pleased to say it's picked up since. But throughout that, it's a place where the people have a great pride in the city and a great sense of humour as well. So I'm a very, very proud Liverpudlian.
Nice. So you're born in Liverpool, and you also had your schools and university around the same area, Jon?
School, yeah. In fact, I went to the same school from the ages of 6 to 17, a place called Liverpool College, and my parents actually taught there. And it was a wonderful place. It had a Latin school motto. It's quite an old-fashioned sort of school. Non solum ingenii verum etiam virtutis, and I can remember it to this day. And that means not only for learning but also for character. So it was a great place for sort of academic education, but it was also the kind of wider picture, doing treks over mountains at cadet force camps. Remember setting off age 14 in the school minibus, a group of 12 staff and students. We just took the school minibus and headed off to Italy for 3 weeks. And I got involved in acting quite an early age. Aged 8, I played the part of Marigold in a production of Toad of Toad Hall, the musical. And over a while then realized there was a form of acting where you could write your own words, which was debating. So I got very, very involved in debating, ran the debating society, and actually was one of the team of 2 that won the national debating competition, the Observer Mace. So yeah, school, I have a lot of very happy memories. And then university, I crossed from the northwest of England to the northeast of England and went to Durham. And I adored Durham, and I read mathematics, which I hated. I said to someone on a course recently, I was a mathematician at university and I was so good a mathematician, I'm now a writer, go figure. And so, I did the math stuff and I got a university academic prize for my dissertation and, I got a decent enough degree. But it was the other parts of university life I loved. I was on the college governing body. Again, I did debating to a kind of national standard and won quite a few trophies, ran the largest society in the Students' Union, generally kind of made mischief and had fun. Wonderful time in my life.
Wow, Jon, you're an early achiever, Jon, very early achiever. My God. I mean, like the debates that you were talking about, John, what sort of debates will that normally be, John?
Well, I have the I have the poster up in my office room of the first debate I won at university, first competition, which was called the Freshers Debating Competition. And that had the incredibly stupid title of "This House abhors the barbaric and callous slaughter of the red telephone box." England being famous for red telephone boxes you'd make phone calls from. And as people started moving towards mobile phones, they started taking them down. So, there were silly topics like that. And then there were topics of, far more serious importance. One of the national finals I was in, we were debating about sanctions against South Africa back in the awful days of the apartheid regime, for example. But the skill of debating at school and university isn't necessarily that you get to choose your own side of the debate. You can be told the topic 1 hour before the debate starts, and you can be on one side or the other. And it really is the skill of kind of marshalling an argument and so on. And it's interesting that some of the people I was debating with and against at school and university, they went on a different career path. They're now very senior politicians, cabinet ministers, and the like. And it's quite entertaining to kind of look back and remember, being across the room in a debating chamber with them 30-something years ago.
John, while you were talking, I actually visualized yourself in the parliament debating now. I don't know why. You're standing on one side.
Was never going to go into politics. Not not my thing. But it is in terms of being, passionately interested in a lot of political stuff. But in terms of doing it for a living, no way.
So from Durham University, John, what was your first job, John, and how did you enter the proposal world from there?
So there was a bit of a journey, actually, from my first job into the proposal world, kind of probably a couple of stages to that. My first job was working for a charity called the Industrial Society. And they've been around nearly 100 years, and their mission was to promote the fullest involvement of people in their work. And I did a 12-month sabbatical as the national campaign leader for something called the Student Industrial Society, which in those days was the largest non-political student organisation in the UK. So I travelled around the country to university campuses. I was doing speeches. I was training some of the local committees in things like leadership skills, communication skills, presenting, creativity, and so on. I'm running some quite big conferences. So you can see some threads immediately from that stuff of 21-year-old John to some of the things I've done later in my career. But also, I think working for a charity at that stage gave me some fairly deep-seated values and about giving back and about being passionate about personal development, and particularly about leadership, because the Industrial Society had some of the kind of the UK's leading thinkers about leadership at the time.
Sure.
So the charity thing came first. I then did the management trainee, graduate training scheme stuff that a lot of people did at the time. So I went to work for a company called ICI, who were one of the world's leading chemical companies at the time, a wonderful graduate training scheme, as a kind of business analyst. And I ended up 4 years or so into my career being given a job as IT manager for the purchasing and sales teams. And I suddenly thought, oh, that stuff's interesting. Like, this procurement stuff fascinates me. The salespeople, well, now they're an interesting breed. And I guess fast forward a couple of years, I then got more deeply involved in procurement. I was in a senior purchasing role for Barclays Bank. I was responsible for all the procurement of their PCs, their servers, their help desks around the world. Loving life on the procurement side. But then kind of had an intriguing experience. So I just run a major outsourcing project. And this was worth 20-something years ago, hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds. So it was a very, very big deal in the IT world. And the contract was won by a consortium led by Dell. And the people who came second were Compaq, who obviously became part of Hewlett Packard. And Compaq had some wonderful people in their team. And some brilliant capabilities. But unfortunately, I guess the way they ran the bid was a textbook lesson in how not to bid. Other than, at the end, knowing they'd lost, they tried to get some feedback. So they took me as the client out for dinner, gave me a few glasses of wine, After a few glasses of wine, I said, I could have written a better proposal than your people did. And after a few glasses of the wine, they said, well, if you're so clever, come and join us and stop us losing bids like that in future. And it led to an embarrassed phone conversation the following morning when we were all slightly hungover. And they said, did we offer you a job somewhere over dessert last night? I said, I think you did. Do you fancy taking it? And so I did. And so I moved 1999 out of the procurement world into the kind of sales and proposal world, set up and ran Compaq Strategic Bid Centre for the UK and Ireland, and then some other countries. Followed Suite in Compaq, followed the model that we'd set up. Win rate went up to something like 80%. And I built a team of some remarkable people who themselves have gone on to great things in the proposal profession. So Martin Smith, who now runs Bid Solutions in the UK, brilliant guy. He was one of the members of the team. Richard Jenkins, who works with me in strategic proposals in the UK, who's a fellow of APMP. Francis Campbell, who went on to become a fellow of APMP, of course, sadly passed away last year. A lady called Christine Diaz, who came over from the US to be integral to the team and took over running that for me. So my first experience, I guess, of running a big proposal centre was just a joy and something I look back, huge pride.
Wow, John, that's a fascinating journey, John, from charity, leadership training, procurement, sales, moving on into bid. You have pretty much touched the whole way, John. And now with strategic proposals, 20 years, 30 countries, I'm sure you are involved on hundreds of proposals, John. Can you pick some of the most memorable proposal efforts over the years, John?
Yeah, and I absolutely love the challenge of working on proposals. I'm someone who's got a very low boredom threshold. So the fact that I'm in a profession where you can jump from one proposal to the next every few weeks or few months, something that gives me a great buzz. And actually, I've only actually been personally involved in a couple of losing proposals in the last decade. So I'm very lucky that the stuff I tend to get involved in, working with clients, is stuff that kind of wins. I think within that, probably as bid and proposal people, we can all associate with the fact that there are some deals that matter more than others. There are the ones where, when you learn you've won, you kind of punch the air with joy. You do that little sort of proposal dance of joy. You feel like you're floating on air for the next few days.
Yes.
And I can think, and I wouldn't want to name kind of specific ones because they're obviously all with particular clients. But if I think of the last couple of years, I can think of deals in insurance, in construction, engineering, defence, although I don't do that much in defence, one for a charity that really appeal with that. And I guess if people are listening and know that work with me, they'll probably know the ones I'm meaning. If you ask me my all-time favourite, they always say, you never forget your first love. So I guess that's the one I'll choose, which is the first one I won for Compaq back in about 1999, 2000. And I was playing a kind of strategy role on a bid to outsource Shell's global desktop IT infrastructure. Again, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And we weren't the front runner because Compaq had just lost a similar bid to me when I'd been at Barclays before I joined them. There was a sense that maybe they shouldn't even bid for it. I can remember going back to the bid no bid meeting. And there was an air of despondency and we shouldn't do this and we're never going to win it. And I happened to have a clean white pocket handkerchief in my pocket and I took it out during the qualification meeting and waved it in the air until someone noticed and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm waving the white flag of surrender. If we don't chase deals like this, we might as well all pack up and go home." And through that process, and some of the late nights, we had a wonderful office in a place called Basingstoke where you could sit late in the evening. There were big lawns outside and the deer would start walking across the lawns. So we'd be writing the proposal and the deer would be grazing on the grass outside. And it really taught me, I guess, how absolute focus on the quality of proposal can propel you to the front of the pack. And we won the deal. And yeah, you kind of get a bit of a taste for winning.
Having trained just on APMP certification, close to 2,500 plus professionals, plus many other bespoke training that you have done. Where did it all begin, John? And do you have any memorable training effort?
Training's always been part of what I do. I mean, the industrial society its lifeblood was education, training, personal development. And all the way through my career, I've had a passion for training. But I also hold very sincerely the view that you can't have people who just train. The people who train you have to have the credibility in the subject matter. So I try and spend my time between working on live deals, helping organizations benchmark and improve their capabilities, and then then I get let out to go and talk about it and have some fun in the classroom. So training for me sits within that kind of overall picture. Trying to pick a favorite training program is an interesting one. I'm torn between two. One of which was not work we did for clients, actually. It was something called our Rising Stars program. It was Strategic Proposal's 30th birthday 3 years ago. And we ran a little competition in the UK to find 20 or so, we couldn't quite narrow it down to 20, ended up a couple more than that, 20 or so of the kind of best younger people in the profession, age 30 or under, or people who were relatively new to their careers in bid and proposal. And we ran training sessions for them, I mean, all at our cost as kind of putting back into the profession in London. And then we took them for a residential event in Stratford-on-Avon and did some coaching and just formed this amazing group of kind of passionate people early in their careers who've all since over the last few years gone on to do wonderful things. So that one for the people is memorable. I guess the other one was one I did a few years ago for Alcatel-Lucent, who are now part of Nokia. And I picked that one. It was a mix of doing our 2-day masterclass and then go back a little while later and coach them through APMP Foundation. And actually for some of them, APMP practitioner as well. And what was wonderful about that was it was the most international of the programs that I've run. This was genuinely across Europe, the Middle East and Africa. Having met some great people in Romania, for example, where now APMP has one of its newest chapters. Spent a lot of time in Stuttgart in Germany, which is a city I got to love. Including Stuttgart, I used to misjudge. They have a fabulous Christmas market. And I was there 3 Decembers on the run. And the first 2 Decembers, I was there the week before the Christmas market. So the final time I was in Stuttgart, I had to make sure it was the right week that the market was there. But then, some of the challenges, some of the fun of traveling, going to Morocco to run training and finding I got to Morocco, my luggage didn't get further than Paris, and having to go to the souk and literally buy some clothes to go and run the session, or going to Egypt to run some training and finding I managed to get on the last flight out because there was a military coup while I was there.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I just adored that one because of the travel and the people, and also it was the first program, I was going back a few years, where we really did some online training. They had folks in places like Pakistan, some West African countries, people in Iraq, who simply, it was just not affordable for me to go to them or for them to come to us, or practical at times. So running some of that stuff online was a really interesting and actually quite early introduction to doing some online training.
Wow, John, I mean, like you took me for a mini travel around the world just now. Strategic proposals, John. I mean, like 30-year journey, but much bigger for the past 20 years. You have teams in UK, US, Netherlands, and much wider partners across different countries. You want to share how it all began and how it evolved?
Yeah. So when I was at Compaq, I brought BJ Lownie, founder of Strategic Proposals, in to work with me. He was by far the best proposal person I'd encountered in my procurement days. He'd been involved working on a proposal that was submitted to me. And the two of us came at proposals from completely different backgrounds. BJ, who people have listened to his interview, I hope that you did with him previously, people came at this from sort of journalism and operational management. I came at it from a procurement point of view. And we were able to sit down and say, look, in a typical bid, this is what's going on the procurement side. What's going on at that point on the proposal side? Okay, this is going on the proposal side. What's driving that on the procurement side? And then also throw into the mix a guy called Steve Mullins. Steve is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, and I think in many ways one of the kind of leading lights of the procurement profession in the UK over the last 20 years or so. And he was running a company called PMMS, one of the leading strategic procurement consultancies. And I'd met Steve in my days at Barclays. So we had this kind of little trinity at Compaq of Steve with a procurement guru hat on, BJ with his as a kind of proposal guru, and me in the middle, kind of learning from both of them and trying to bring the best of their ideas together and come up with some cool ways of doing stuff. And you know, over one of those kind of dinner conversations between the three of us, it sort of felt logical that if, you know, the stuff we were doing for Compaq was working so magically, there must be other organizations in the UK and Europe who were looking for similar support, and that it made sense to set up a UK part of BJ's company, Strategic Proposals. So we did that. We did that in August 2001. I incubated it for the first 5 years within PMMS, the procurement consultancy that Steve ran, which was great because, you know, as a board director of a procurement consultancy, you get to see an awful lot of what's going on that side of the table and build some very strong networks that have stayed with me since. And so that's kind of where it started. You know, fast forward now, you know, nearly 20 years on in the UK. And, you know, I've got a team here in the UK, just over 30. And we refer to ourselves as the SP, Strategic Proposals, SP family. You know, there really is a sense of, you know, and just some brilliant, kind, thoughtful people around, and some fabulous clients, of course, as well, and fabulous people within those clients. And as anyone who works on the kind of external rather than the in-house side in the bid and proposal profession, I guess, you know, I'm eternally grateful to them for the trust they've put in us over the years, and hopefully we've repaid that many times over.
That's brilliant, John. I mean, like, yeah, the family word is pretty heartening to hear. Even when we interviewed BJ mentioned you are his best friend.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, people refer to us as being a bit like an old married couple. You know, we kind of can guess what one another's thinking, and we know the right moment to try and cheer one another up. And, you know, we have the little arguments. BJ may have told you the story, but we tend to take the view that despite coming at this from different backgrounds, we instinctively probably agree on about 90% of stuff. Of the rest, you know, that's where some of the magic comes. There's the kind of 5% or so where we go for very long walks and we kind of discuss and debate and argue, and then eventually want to go, okay, so this is, you know, this is the solution. And you know, then there's the couple of percent which we don't agree on, where BJ is just frankly wrong. But funny enough, that's the same couple of percent where he thinks I'm wrong. So I'll tell you one silly little story like that. When we wrote our book, Proposal Essentials, we had a kind of final draft of this, and we were doing a page turn, and we locked ourselves away in a meeting room in New York City for a week. And we were literally turning the page and challenging everything we'd written and playing with it. And at one point on, I think, chapter 3 of the book, there was one paragraph where we just had this profound disagreement about what it was saying. And it ended up with the two of us storming out of the meeting room, setting off walking around New York City, sulking in different directions. And like any kind of couple have had an argument, about an hour later, one of us sent a little message saying, should we talk? Should we meet up? Went back, solved the issue within about 3 minutes and moved on. So yeah, I mean, I value my friendship with BJ hugely. He is a brilliant man.
In between, while you were launching Strategic Proposals as a global company, you also founded UK chapter of APMP, John, and you were at FUSSU as well. Do you want to go back to that point in time and share the history of how it all began, John?
Sure. And apologies to some of your listeners who might have heard this tale before. It's funny that, having set up APMP UK with a great friend, Chris Wyatt, and I was its first chief executive of what was APMP's first international chapter. You know, I get wheeled out to tell the story occasionally, but you know, I go back to January 2001, and I'd locked my strategic bid centre team in Compaq away for 3 or 4 days in a hotel at Stratford-upon-Avon. And I run a pretty intensive launch session for, we had the team, then we expanded the team. And so it was the existing team members and the new folks who joined us. And I ran that with BJ and a friend of his called Izzy Gassal, who did an APMP bid and proposal con keynote at one point. Izzy is a professional stand-up comedian, does lots of improv stuff. And we'd had an amazing couple of days. And they say leadership is the art of delegation. So I'd been through this entire, and I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 days, phones off, locked away, and I'd only taken one action myself from the 3 or 4 days from the team. And that was to find a way for them to network with their peers from other organizations. And I knew, because BJ was very active in APMP, BJ had been involved in the very, very first discussions that led to the very first more formal meetings that led to the association being set up in the States in the first place. So I knew of APMP, and I walked out of the conference venue to get into my car thinking, okay, going to have to work out how we ask APMP whether they might be interested in expanding internationally. Got back into my car, dialed into my voicemail. Up pops a voicemail message from a couple of days before from Chris Wyatt, who I mentioned, saying, I was wondering, John, if we should set up a UK part of APMP. And there was just this staggering synchronicity that we both hatched the same sort of plan independently in the same week. And so it felt like, okay, there must be some sense in this. So we reached out to APMP in the States. And, they were hugely supportive. We ran a couple of early meetings, which I hosted at Compaq. I kind of cajoled my team to attend, people I knew in the profession, people like Tony Birch, for example. Tony, come along, bring some people and it was kind of bring a friend. Mm-hmm. And so we had, we slowly but surely expanded. And the rest, as they say, is history. And APMP, since then, that was the first international chapter. I love that I can, with all sincerity, stand up running certification courses around the world now and say that APMP is a genuinely global organization. And I think APMP has been hugely important to me in my career for broadening my experiences, making friends with so many brilliant people, sharing ideas, hearing ideas, seeing and hopefully contributing to the emergence of what I think is now a genuine profession, helping people pass certification, traveling the world, giving keynotes at their conferences in places like Australia, South Africa. And Rick Harris and his team in APMP really do an amazing job. And, I'm not sure everyone always says thank you enough to them, but we need to say thank you to them, and they should be really, really proud of themselves. Awards was something we didn't do in the first few years because, we just set up and we were getting to critical mass and we were focused on events and running, I ran and chaired the first conference, and how on earth do you do that? And I think it's fair to say I ran the first award for relating to bids and proposals in the UK before APMP UK did it. And I really did it to try and force APMP UK's hand to say, look, these awards are a good thing. And it was for proposal design. Yes. And it was in about 2008. And I was, we had organizations send in and they could redact stuff if they wanted, examples of the best design of proposals that they'd done, in the recent past. And I happened to be with a firm at the back end of last year who'd won that competition. And I dug out the design examples that had won them that competition 12 years ago. And let's just say your proposal looks very 2008 isn't a compliment. And it's interesting to see how far we've moved as a profession and to have some of these benchmarks. I have archives of proposal documentation going back 20 or so years, and you can see the change and how we've grown.
Over the years, John, you have contributed so much to APMP. Do you have any memorable contributions in APMP BidCon?
Oh, lots and lots and lots of them. I've given, as I mentioned, keynotes at a few APMP conferences around the world, including several at Bid and Proposal Con. If I focus on the kind of main event in the US what was my favorite? I'm going to say one we did in Phoenix, Arizona in about 2005. I'll probably get the year wrong, which was called the Fairy Tale Proposal. And BJ and I kind of collaborated on this, as we've done on lots of the sessions over the years. So the Fairy Tale Proposal, my son Benedict was 5 years old at the time, and I thought it'd be quite fun to write a children's fairy story. So I wrote this fairy story, and it's quite long, it's 4,000 or 5,000 words, about a group of scribes working in an ancient castle for an evil prince, and they were writing out announcements, proclamations using dragon's blood. And they were struggling, there weren't enough of them to manage the workload. They were working in the deepest, darkest, dingiest corridors of the castle. They kept running out of dragon's blood to write on the scripts. And all the way through, as I read the story, or a little chapter from the story, BJ then presented the exactly parallel story of a proposal team that was struggling for resource and to be taken seriously, and so on and so forth. And the two stories completely mirrored. And as the tale unfolded, we showed how the scribes in the fairy tale solved some of their problems and lived happily ever after. And BJ showed some of the things absolutely in parallel that meant that the proposal center succeeded. So just because it was quirky and different, and actually because the fairy story is, I'm really quite proud of the fairy tale. I've got a 14-month-old daughter, Erin, now, and at some point when she's old enough, I want to read her the fairy tale. Hopefully it won't scare her too much. But I reread it, probably about a couple of years ago for a book we were writing, which we included it in. And yeah, it's just fun. I'm really proud of it.
Wow, that's brilliant, Jon. I mean, while we were speaking to BJ was also mentioning about some of the very interesting live, and I used to call it edutainment, where how you brought the entertainment to the education.
I think his favorite is probably one we did called Church of Proposal Excellence. That was an absolute. That was in Savannah, Georgia. That would probably be my second favorite. But we've done silly ones over the years. We did one a keynote at the APMP UK conference one year, where we had people. I mean, we try and make these sessions as interactive as we can, and we did things like how many proposals had they produced, what was the typical length of the proposal. We did some polling. What was the total value of bids they'd won over the previous year, and this is going back probably 10 years or so. And we could work out the number of forests that have been cut down to make the trees to print the proposals. We worked out, I think, that if APMP UK conference that year was a country, if you added up the value of all the deals they won, we would have been something like the 100th biggest country in the world. So it's fun just to do quirky stuff like that.
Wow. Perfect, Jon. And part of your contribution, Jon, you as we talked in the intro, and as you also touched about the Proposal Essentials book, it was published in 2013, Jon. Can you share experience of writing the first book, Jon? And I'm one of the beneficiary of that book myself, and also share the positive impact it kind of created in the industry, feedbacks.
Yeah, so I think we got to the point where we just felt we should have a book out there. And we thought there was a gap in the market. So, it must be almost 10 years ago that we started work on it, or came up with the concept for it. And at that point, pretty much every book on proposal development out there was 300 pages, 400 pages. I'm passionate about proposals, but I don't want to sit and read 300 pages about proposals in a book. So we didn't think there was anything that really had more kind of mass market appeal. We didn't think there was anything that, not only would proposal and bid professionals want to read, but that salespeople would want to pick up, that subject matter experts or content contributors, as I tend to call them, or senior managers would want to pick up. So we wanted something that was very conversational, very accessible, also very practical in terms of some tools and techniques in there. And our kind of fundamental design criteria was keep it short. And I can't remember exactly, I think I'm right in saying that it must be possible to read this book cover to cover on one transatlantic flight or 2 return commutes by train into the office, which gave a kind of sense of we're not writing a tome here, and led to it being, about 100 pages. And, then wrote it, had it beautifully set out and designed by Kira Gilsonan, who's one of our design team. You may recognize the people listening. It's got a big, bright yellow cover. People come up to me and say, "Did you write the yellow book?" I had a proposal manager at a conference a year or so ago come up and say she was on her 6th copy of the book because she kept lending it to people mid-bid and never persuading them to give it back to her, which is quite flattering. And yeah, over the years, I guess it's been a phenomenal seller, and we're very proud of it. Very, very proud of it. And it's very different, actually. We wrote another book a couple of years ago called Passionate About Proposals, which is an anthology of the best entries of the Proposal Guys, the blog that BJ and I had for many years, before kind of LinkedIn took over all of that sort of stuff. I'm passionate about proposals. We kind of give away. It's £1 or $1 on Amazon if you want it on Kindle. And that's more fun. That's a book to kind of dip into and read stories and the like. But Proposal Essentials is the kind of 10 steps in running a proposal really well. I just love, and I look back at it myself fairly regularly. At some point we'll do an update, but so much of it, even 6-7 years on, absolutely still rings true.
And you did mention the word passionate about proposals, Jon, which is also tagline of SP. What does the word passionate about proposals mean to you?
So we've always held that there are 3 distinct but very, very closely related disciplines. If you think about this, there's sales, there's bids, and there's proposals. And I'm a proposal guy. I'm not a salesperson. So how do you open doors? How do you form great working relationships with clients? Where do opportunities come from? That's like magic. And I'm not really a bid person either. How do you assemble the right team to build the right proposition for the clients, devise, deliver the overall campaign plan, work with the client in that more detailed level beneath the salespeople, from a more perhaps technical perspective at times. Again, not really my expertise. For example, negotiation skills. I've worked with some of the best negotiation skills people in the world, and I know I'm not one of them. So I can do some of that stuff if I have to, because there's times in a proposal effort where you have to sort of step back and say, there's some things here that haven't happened, some dependencies. But it's not really my passion. It's not really my forte. And the whole sense, capture is a very in phrase in the proposal world at the moment. We'll be doing something like capture certification training for APMP. I've got people in my team who are brilliant at that stuff and passionate about it. I'm not, to be honest. So you've got the sales thing, which I don't do. You've got the bid thing, and I don't really think of myself as a bid person. You've then got the bit of how do you turn your story into a brilliant, compelling document that's going to convince the customer to choose you, not the competition. And how do you bring that to life when you get asked in to go and pitch to them? And that's what fascinates me, and that's what I like to think I do really well. And I think too many organizations underestimate the importance of the proposal part of that trilogy in creating competitive advantage, or that they confuse bid management and proposal management. So it's that sense of really getting proposals and why they're so important, and why there's a real skill set and mindset around doing those, and why it's so important. That I think is at the heart of why we're so passionate about proposals.
Wow, Jon, I think the way you demystified bids, proposals, sales is classic, Jon. It's classic you, and also being that self-aware of what you're great at. Also, it's it elevates you to a very different level, Jon. I think that's what makes you unique. So, Jon, you are also a fellow of the Institute of Sales Management and also Royal Society of Art. Please, can you share more about your association, of where that began, and why you are associated with those industry bodies?
Yeah, sure. And I think kind of the trio of fellowships is probably unique in the profession. It's something I'm very proud of. ISM, Institute of Sales Management first. I think it's been an important journey we've been on with the ISM over the last 7 years, 8 years. ISM being the kind of preeminent body for sales professionals in the UK. There is another association of professional sales as well, but ISM's been kind of around longer, and they're the ones that we started working with. And it's been an interesting journey for us to work with them, and for them, I think, to start to realise that what we do as proposal professionals is an essential cog in the wheel in the sales process. And that as proposal people, fundamentally, we are contributing to winning business. And our relationship with them began when we started popping up in the finals of their annual awards. They run something called BESMA, the British Excellence in Sales Management Awards, each year. And we just started getting to the final of this, and then the next year getting to the final, and then winning it one year with one of our clients. And that led to some interesting conversations, and then the relationship deepened, and I'm now a fellow. Some of our other UK team, our directors are fellows of ISM. We're a kind of approved partner for proposal training, and they're just they're a great organisation. Royal Society of Arts, different. I mean, that's an organisation with nearly 300 years worth of history, and I could probably bore you with I won't, but I could probably bore you with a long story linking something called the Wine Society, which is a cooperative that is my kind of wine merchant of choice, with the Great Exhibition of 1851, which took place in London. They built something called the Crystal Palace, and it's an event I'm absolutely fascinated by. I read kind of lots about it. It was the first time, because it was just after kind of the rail network had been built in the UK. It was the first time that people in the UK really travelled around the country. People came in their millions to London to visit this great exhibition. And the Royal Society of Arts was the organisation behind that in 1851. So I have this fascination with this kind of event, partly driven by the fact it's linked to my wine merchant, which leads me to be fascinated with the RSA.
Yes.
And then when the chance then came up to apply for the fellowship of the RSA, which is a sort of network for creative people, I jumped at it. And I'm going to just give you one example, I guess, with the RSA. So in February this year, which given everything that's gone on since feels like a different era. But in February this year, we ran something called Proposals 2020, which was a flagship event that we ran in the great room of RSA House. We had about 100 invited audience, 100 heads of bid and proposals in there, and had different speakers. Had a great day. And that room is the room from which Alexander Graham Bell made the first telephone call.
Oh, wow.
So you get the sense of history. Yeah, I was watching, trying to keep on time in the sessions I was leading, making sure I stayed on time, with a clock in the room that dated from something like 1760. It did a very good job of keeping me on time, because I thought, well, you can't let down a clock that's been here 250 odd years. So yeah, both in very different ways, fascinating organisations.
Being a successful entrepreneur, Jon, and having trained, inspired so many people, and also have pretty much helped so many businesses grow their company, what would you say, Jon, are the accomplishments that you are most proud of?
Oh, most proud of. I think it has to be kind of the team that I've built, here in the UK. It is a tough one, but to go from a standing start in the UK with all of the great stuff that BJ had done with strategic proposals in the States, and to build a group of 31, I think, at the latest count, including our kind of logistics people, of such fabulous people. The only work thing I have framed on my office wall, other than actually I have a framed photo of the 1851 Great Exhibition we were just talking about, or photo print, but I have the framed menu of our 30th anniversary dinner from a restaurant called The Ivy, which is one of London's most famous restaurants. 3 or 4 years ago. And we invited some of our closest friends from the profession to celebrate. And it's that sense of going from BJ doing fabulous stuff in the States to setting that up and building on that in the UK. And doing that in a way, I think, that reflects a lot of my values. You know, I don't take a salary from the company for being managing director. I just, take money for doing the work I do for my clients. As a shareholder in the business, I don't draw a dividend. We run this as a kind of group of people who help one another succeed, create an atmosphere, I think, in which some brilliant people can thrive. And they continually surprise me in a good way. The number of times I see a document, see something they've produced, and just go, wow, that's amazing. And so, it's the team we've built that is kind of the thing I really would be proudest of, I think. And you see, our team goes, so we talked about the US and the UK, our team goes further than that. We have a wonderful business called Strategic Proposals NL, business in the Netherlands. And I'd worked with Janneke Oriens and Richard Baus, who runs that business. Back in Compaq days, actually, Janneke was running the equivalent of the Strategic Bid Centre for Compaq in the Netherlands, and we helped her replicate the UK model and do some fabulous stuff there. So, they're wonderful and dear friends. And then, through APMP, over the years, I've met, other people with similar like-minded organisations to ours, with whom we've formed kind of partnerships, and we share stuff and chat to one another and keep one another smiling. People like Nigel Dennis in Australia at BidRite, and you've got Chris Kalin in the German-speaking countries. Sandy Pullinjo set up Enfold in South Africa, and now Larissa Cornelius running that. Just brilliant people with businesses who are at the same stage of evolution as ours, similar outlooks, commitment to APMP, and just, brilliant, trustworthy, kind people. And so, the UK team for SP is one of our 3 countries. It's that broader network of kind of fabulous people around there that it's just wonderful.
As a slow entry to our surprise and fun rapid fun questions, Jon, do you mind sharing 3 things not many people know about you, Jon?
Wow. In a funny way, that's a hard question, because I like to think I'm quite an open person. So I write a lot I've done in the LinkedIn and the proposal guys over the years about, my views, my experiences, how I'm feeling about stuff. Okay, number 1, I'm an introvert. Okay, that might surprise people who see me standing up at conferences, hundreds of people in the room, or running training courses or facilitating strategy meetings. If I've got a role to play, then I will relish that role and I can be the life and soul of the party. Otherwise, dump me in a room full of strangers and I'll be the person standing next to the plants in the corner of the room and chat to the one person I already know and escape as quickly as I can. So that's probably one. Second one might tie into that, actually. I think a lot of us have this sense of what people call imposter syndrome. I kind of lead what I like to think of as one of the most successful proposal teams in the world. I had 20 years of doing this, plus the time in procurement before, and winning big deals and doing training, getting great feedback and setting up bid centers and speaking and so on. And I still get the mornings when I think, who am I to be preaching about all of this stuff? And what that does in turn is mean that I don't stand still. That sense of kind of imposter syndrome is part of what means that I'm forever wanting to meet people and listen to what people are saying and do research and read and write about the stuff. So that would be another. What's the other one? The other one's an easy one. I've travelled to more than 80 countries. I've kind of hinted at travel being a passion already. My ambition in life is to get to having travelled in 100 countries. There's something called the Traveller's Centenary or Centurion Club for people who've been to 100 countries. I think I'm about 15 short at the moment.
Oh.
My plans to tick off the last few might be slightly delayed by what's going on in the world at the moment, but I promise you, I will get there. My wife is resigned to the fact that at some point we'll have to do a cruise in the Caribbean that picks off about 10 different islands just to get the ticks in the box to get up to the 100.
I think let's bring a few things that you mentioned, Jon, and we'll just go from there, because you did talk about the wine society, Jon. I understand that you are trained and knowledgeable wine professional, like a sommelier.
Not quite at sommelier level, but there are professional wine tasting qualifications that mirror the kind of structure in a way of the APMP Foundation Practitioner Professional, and there's Wine and Spirit Education Trust qualification lead up to Masters of Wine, of which there aren't many in the world, but I have this sort of, I'm a qualified qualified alcoholic, I guess you might call it. I kind of, I do enjoy the almost the research aspect. I guess the goal I set myself years ago when I first started thinking, I quite enjoy the occasional glass. I wouldn't want people to think I have a drink problem. My goal was that I could go and sit down in a restaurant and look at the wine list, and for whatever price I want to pay, choose something that would go, the best thing on the list that would go beautifully with whatever we were eating at the time. And so, I spent quite a lot of time reading about it. One of the things in this lockdown period, I did a virtual wine tasting the week before. I'm a member of a wine club called 67 Pall Mall, and they had a virtual wine tasting with the guy who runs something called Chateau Moussard, which is the top winery in the Lebanon. If you've not tasted their wines, they are phenomenal. I'm kind of, it's something I'm fascinated by. When we go out for dinner in the States, BJ usually chooses the restaurant, and I usually choose the wine from the list.
Oh, wow, that's amazing, Jon. And I assume you have a wine collection at home, Jon?
I have some at home, but the wine society I mentioned, I tend to buy stuff when it's released and lay it down at the wine society, and then you leave it there for 10 years, 15 years or whatever until it's in sort of prime condition to drink. And what that means is then you're drinking stuff that's 15, 20 years old that you never find in the shops. And also you paid a fraction 15 years ago for what you'd pay if you did have to buy it today. So you're always kind of drinking stuff that's better than you're laying down. And the Wine Society is fascinating. It's a cooperative, been around since the 1870s, and you're actually a member of the society. So they're not kind of making money from you. They're just, if anyone in the UK is interested in wine, look up the Wine Society, the cooperative, and it's remarkable.
Yes, Jon. So in addition to being part of the Wine Society, Jon, how do you keep this passion alive?
With wine? Well, I mean, it's reading about it. It's, watching videos, occasionally going and traveling to some of the great wine areas. I've done trips to wine areas in South Africa, Champagne, Alsace. That I find kind of fascinating, and just sharing decent wines and trying decent stuff. I've loved them. I've been a couple of trips to South Africa in the last couple of years. The wine there is phenomenal. I had some great times tasting some of the great South African wines.
That's brilliant, Jon. And from the Wine Society, Jon, what kind of secret society would you like to start, Jon?
Oh, good Lord. Can I go back to the kind of things that people don't know and have the kind of introverts that people think are extroverts society? Because I think there's a lot of us out there. Yes. I think if you look at proposal people, and a lot of us by background are, naturally people who want to write or design or whatever. And we all stand up and we wave our arms around on conference platforms, but not all of us actually. That's our natural behavior. So, I think that the secret society of introverts who people think are extroverts would be quite a fun one. Although the meetings would be terribly boring, of course, because we'd all be introverts. So we'd all be standing around the edges of the room, not talking to one another, waiting for someone taking the lead and all leaving quickly.
Yes, Jon, I think it's quite brilliant that you said that. And if you listen to Randy Richter's episode, and when I asked him the same question, the first thing he said was exactly the same as what he said.
Right.
And,
Love it.
and I felt the same myself. And I mean, like, in this 2 weeks, I'm listening to 3 people who I look into said exactly the same, which makes me feel like, okay, I'm not the only one, which is great. So
and one of the great things you're doing here, Bhaskar, and I said before we started recording this, I mean, you're creating a kind of repository, an archive of interviews with some of the most experienced people in our profession, and some of our veterans or people who've just been around a long time, fellows of APMP and so on. And you are creating an amazing resource for this profession here, and I'm very proud to be contributing to that.
Thank you so much, Jon. I think it's my little thing of giving back, and I can't be you or people like at least I can document what you have done and share it to the future. It's a little part from me. Thank you, Jon. That means a lot to me. Jon, from our email conversation, I know you are a good cook, Jon. And what I didn't realize was you're also a gourmet level cook. Is that true, Jon?
That's probably BJ flattering me to you, is he? It's a great way of relaxation for me, not only kind of researching what to cook and the library of, well, it's about 100 cookbooks, and I kind of cycle things in and out of that, and then the ones I get bored of disappear off to the charity shop. But at the end of a long day, and at the moment we've put our daughter to bed, and then the ability just to get into the kitchen and start chopping stuff up, mixing stuff up, and cooking things from scratch, and experimenting a bit is just something I love. And what we do with proposals is tactile to the extent of we're turning the pages of documents, but it's not really tactile in any other way. And cooking it's a sort of it's hands-on, and it's, as I think everyone in lockdown is doing. I've been doing a bit of baking recently, and it's getting your hands into the mix and kneading the dough, all of this sort of stuff, and it's just I love it.
Perfect, Jon. So what do you cook or bake better than most people Jon?
Oh, crumbs. If you that's a hard one to answer, Bhaskar, because I don't kind of like to stand still with cooking. I do a mean Sunday lunch. I like experimenting with that. My wife is from Ireland, so cooking roast potatoes that please an Irish wife is a hell of a challenge. But for me, it's about cooking new things and cooking different things. I love kind of Middle Eastern cooking. I love cooking from places like Thailand or Vietnam and so on. It's about trying different flavors and playing with stuff. That's the fascination, rather than saying, okay, here's my one dish that would be my standout. And I spend a lot of time watching cookery programs, and sort of thinking, oh, that'd be an interesting one to try. I was watching something last night called The Great British Menu. Right. And thinking, oh, okay, that'd be an interesting dish to have a go at. So yeah, it's something I really enjoy. And of course, the frustration is that I spend so much of my life, usually, not at the moment, traveling, that I don't always get to spend as much time in the kitchen as I'd like. But then I do get, time to spend trying different restaurants, and I have favorite restaurants in different cities around the UK and around the world. And I get boring, my variety in restaurants doesn't come from trying new restaurants in some cities. It comes from being in lots of different cities and having a favorite restaurant and a favorite dish in each of them that I'll go back to.
Oh, wow. Okay, Jon. So at home, Jon, what's your favorite breakfast, dinner, or dessert?
I'm not really a breakfast person. Give me a good strong cup of coffee, and that'll get me going. So it does have to be dinner. It's the bit where you get a little bit more time to sit and relax. The Erin's gone to bed. We can put our feet up. We can have a glass of wine. Cook stuff from scratch. Lunch is normally taken on the fly, and of course, with a baby in the house, lunch is normally distracted because we're sat feeding ourselves, trying to make sure that she tucks into her food and doesn't throw too much of it at the cats or whatever. So yeah, it's got to be dinner. And I used to be a big dessert person. But then I decided at the back end of last year, I really should lose some weight. So I've lost 2.5 stone in UK measures in the last 5 months or so. So yeah, I'm very fond of chocolate, but I'm trying to limit the consumption of it at the moment.
That's perfect, John. I think while cooking, John, do you have a biggest kitchen fail?
Yes, absolutely. Cooking Christmas dinner, 25th of December, probably about 10 years ago. And I had a goose. I love a goose for Christmas dinner. And I had a goose roasting in the oven. And goose, if people haven't cooked it, is an incredibly fatty bird. So the kind of the fat pours off and you have to drain the goose fairly regularly. And I forgot to do this for a while. The kitchen I had at the time, I was washing some dishes up and there were some white tiles in front of the kind of the washing up area in front of the sink. And I suddenly wondered why the white tiles were all yellow. What's that? That's a bit odd. Turned around, found the oven was alight because I hadn't drained the goose enough and the fat had caught fire. So yes, my biggest kitchen fail is nearly setting the house on fire by a goose catching fire in the oven while I was cooking Christmas lunch.
Wow, John. So that's brilliant. So you did mention that you do travel a lot, John. How many days a year do you normally spend in hotels, John?
It depends, but between 120 and 170.
Oh, wow.
Depending on what the projects are, and yeah, I mean, I'm a single child, so I quite enjoy my own company. There's a bit of solitude that comes from that. A couple of nights a week. It isn't all the kind of the glamour that people might think. I'm lucky in a way. I try very hard. If I'm traveling, particularly if I'm traveling internationally, to have a little bit of time to myself. For example, if I'm running a training course for a group of proposal people, we'll finish at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And if I'm there until the following day, I'll quite often just take myself off for the evening and go for a walk around the city or whatever. But it can be quite tiring. So I've been very lucky to see a huge amount of the world and a huge amount of the world through work. But at the same time, it's not all glamour, and it can be quite draining.
Wow. So have you ever booked holidays to be the first to stay in a new hotel?
I've booked several to be a very early stayer in new hotels, and that can work well, or that can work horrendously badly. So a couple of summers ago, one of my favorite cities in the world is a place called Trieste in northeast Italy, right on the border with Slovenia. Slovenia was part of Yugoslavia, so Trieste was kind of on the frontier of the kind of the Cold War between kind of Italy, the kind of the Eastern Bloc, and historically it was the port city for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So it has this huge, strange mix of kind of Italian, Austrian, a bit of Eastern European, gorgeous place. So a couple of years ago, the hotel chain I tend to stay with is Marriott. Stayed in one of their luxury collection hotels that had just opened in Trieste. And the infrastructure was gorgeous. But, one of the things when you stay in a brand new place is that sometimes, as with any job, the staff are kind of learning how to make the best of the infrastructure they've got available. And let's just say they were in the very early days of learning, and the whole thing was a disaster. And I checked out of the hotel after about 2 days to go somewhere more interesting in the same city. So, yeah, staying in new places is fun. But probably not too new would be my wise counsel.
Yes, John. And do you submit the details to TripAdvisor and stuff, John?
Yes, I'm in the top 1% of TripAdvisor's reviewer globally. They sent me a kind of a fleece sweatshirt thing a few years ago as a thank you for the number of reviews I do. So yeah, and I do make the point when I'm on things like TripAdvisor of being, of writing reviews of the places I love. Excuse me, as well as writing reviews of the places that have disappointed me. And I think there's a danger on any of these kind of review sites, and it can be Amazon or it can be Google or whatever. The people sort of jump in when they hate something and they complain, and that ability to say, look, this was wonderful and thank you, I think it's missing from too many reviewers.
Yes, that's well said, John. And I didn't realize that you were in the top 1%. So I'll go and have a look at TripAdvisor.
Well, I'm not writing any reviews at the moment,
I could imagine.
TripAdvisor review of the office, TripAdvisor review of the front room, TripAdvisor review of the kitchen. That's about as far as we all get.
So if you could be anywhere else right now, Jon, you did mention a couple of favorite cities, favorite places. So just for the question, if you could be anywhere else right now, where would you choose to go and why?
Kyoto in Japan, without any hesitation. I've been very lucky to spend 2 separate month-long trips to Japan, and I adore Kyoto. I don't know if you've been, but it has something like 18 World Heritage sites in the city. It's such a blend of kind of ancient and modern, and some of the ancient sites in Kyoto, the temples, the Zen gardens, are just so peaceful and so beautiful and so calming. And then you get into the buzz of the city, and it has, I'll get the number wrong, it's like 80 Michelin starred restaurants. And it's just a fabulous mix. And so, yeah, without hesitation, I'd put Kyoto as kind of number one on the list.
Yes, Jon, I think that's a beautiful place. My wife is from there.
Is she? I didn't know that. Oh, wow. So you must get to go more often than I do. I'm craving a trip to Japan, but obviously travel at the moment is difficult, but impossible. But the Great Exhibition 1851 I mentioned was the first expo. If people have come across expo, and I kind of rather like expo. It's a big sort of world trade event, and countries have pavilions. So the last one was in Milan 4 years ago. We went to that. The next one is in Dubai, and we're booked to go to that, or apparently they're delaying it for a year. And then the one in 2025 is going to be in Osaka in Japan. So that will probably be my next Japanese fix.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Jon. Happy to help. So I think we have touched, your passion in travel, food, wine. So how do you plan your travels and holidays, Jon?
Sometimes with great care and spending, a long time thinking about it, and sometimes, reading an article, thinking that sounds fun, and getting on and just booking all the stuff suddenly, and then we wake up the following morning going, did we book a holiday to wherever? And after a couple of glasses of wine, we just go on book places. An example of that would be Emma and I going on honeymoon a few years ago. We had a trip booked on the Orient Express, which does an annual trip, or did an annual trip from Scandinavia down through, picks his way through Europe and ends up in Venice. And probably about 4 months before our wedding, we had a call from the people who run the Orient Express, and they left a voicemail saying, could you call us to discuss the itinerary for your trip? So I phoned them back thinking they were going to share some details of which carriage we were going to be in or which hotel we were staying in on one of the nights we stopped off. And they said, we're really sorry, we're not running that train journey this year. To which I said, so hold on, what you're basically telling me is you've cancelled our honeymoon at 3 or 4 months' notice. They're, oh, sorry. And they said, but obviously, you paid us the money. If you want the money back, you can have it, or you can have a look at our website and have a look at any other things we do. And literally in the course of an evening, looked at their website, worked out they had some amazing stuff in Peru, and changed our honeymoon from Italy to Peru overnight. And then went to Peru and had an amazing trip. Peru is a wonderful place to travel, with quite astonishing food. BJ and Carol, his partner, very kindly, their wedding present was to have dinner or lunch in the best restaurant we could find in Peru. And the one we ate in Central, I think at the time was ranked number 4 in the world, 17-course tasting menu. And we got to the end of the 17-course tasting menu, and because they knew we were on honeymoon, they then brought a cake over. It was it's a bit of a kind of not another wafer thin mint moment. But yeah, so yeah, some of it can be long in the planning, and others can just be, okay, let's just go there then. We did last year. My daughter, as I mentioned, is 14 months old. In her first 12 months, she visited 12 countries, which is not bad going. I suspect in her second 12 months, she might not get much further than the end of the street, the way things are going.
So I know you're a voracious reader, John, with an extensive library. When did you cultivate this reading habit, John? And how many books do you read at an average a year?
I've just read since childhood. I've always been a voracious reader. How many do I read at the moment? Not nearly as much, because the ones I'm reading at the moment are mainly ones, aimed at small children. I was reading the London Noisy book this morning to Erin. That's about as far as it gets. I have a couple of books sat on the table next to the armchair in the living room, ones I want to read that are just sat there glaring at me going, you need to read me. I've been sat here and not looked at for a while. Prior to Erin arriving, I'll always take a book with me when I'm traveling, for example. I love good non-fiction stuff. I love reading business stuff. The Culture Map, Erin Mayer, for example, a couple of years ago, one of the best books I've read, The Challenger Sale. Lots of other businessy type stuff that sparks the creativity. And I love losing myself in a good novel. I think probably something like my favorite novel ever is probably something called The Great Indian Novel by a guy called Shashi Tharoor that I picked up on a trip to Bangalore a few years ago. I love the Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I'm sure many listeners will have read that one. Fabulous book. So yeah, I take great pleasure from reading and swapping book recommendations with people, and then occasionally getting to the point where the bookshelves are so overflowing and the floors around the bookshelves are so overflowing that I have to do a kind of a filter through them and then make the local charity shop very happy with a big selection of stuff they can make some money from.
That's brilliant, John. So if you were to write a book about yourself, like an autobiography, John, what would you name it?
Oh, good Lord, that's a tough question. What would I name it? You throw me. I'm not often lost for words. That might be the title. Not often lost for words. That'd be a good title, wouldn't it? Not often lost for words. Yeah, that's what I'll go with. Not often lost for words.
Exactly, John. I think without thinking, the word that immediately comes out of the mouth is sometimes the best title.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing title, John. So, John, I also noticed that you don't work Fridays, John.
No.
When did you take the decision, John, and what do you do on Fridays?
I decided, everyone's talked about life-work balance issues in the proposal profession over recent years. I decided about 4 years ago that I wanted to take some downtime, just for me. And therefore that I was going to work alternate Fridays, and that didn't work, frankly. Trying to remember which Friday I was supposed to be working and which I wasn't, and that didn't work. So I then decided I was going to take the first Friday of the month off. Well, that didn't work either, because there was always something work-wise to do, or somewhere I could travel, something. So when our daughter was born, I said, right, that's it. I'm not working Fridays. So Thursday night, Thursday afternoon, even 5 o'clock, I switch off my email, and even sometimes hide the Outlook app on my phone. And from Thursday night until Monday morning, my time is with Erin, and letting me spend time as a parent and doing fun things. So, and that works. The I am not working Fridays, and people in my team know that, and clients know that and respect that. And my out of office says, look, I don't work Fridays. I'm afraid if it's particularly urgent, send me a text message. But people are very, very good at respecting it. And it's an interesting dynamic, because I probably do the same number of hours in the 4 days that I was previously doing in the 5. But you get to Tuesday night and you think, oh, the week's almost halfway through, which is quite a nice feeling. So if anyone can manage to do that and flex their hours to take Fridays off or Mondays off, I do highly recommend it as a way of kind of just getting some balance in there. Something that's been really successful for me.
That's amazing, John. I think having the discipline of this is my time block and this is how I operate, and having everybody around you kind of accept and make it work, it's a brilliant thing. And I'm sure this time that you're spending with Erin, it's a moment that you will always remember.
Yeah, exactly. And you look at the current situation. We're recording this in the middle of lockdown.
Yes.
Which of course is frustrating, worrying, and stressful for people. And it, it does mean I'm getting to spend some amazing quality time with her at a remarkable time of her life. We literally, my wife and I were both at home with her when she took her first steps, which is, just something, that sort of stuff you'll never forget. And it's fascinating because I've got Benedict, my son, who's now 20. I've got Erin, who's 14 months. I've got two absolutely wonderful kids, but years apart.
Yes, Jon. So I understand with the kids, Jon, you also have cats.
Yes, we have Maine Coons, which is the biggest breed of domestic cat. So they're huge and very curious and very playful. And the number of webinars I've done in the last couple of weeks, where one of them in particular, Tilly, who thinks that my office is actually her office. She's lying on the floor next to me at the moment. Will come and join in the webinar and sit on the arm of my armchair as I'm chatting. We did something yesterday on LinkedIn actually called #ProposalCats, because my team, we interact all the time on Yammer and share things to make one another smile, as well as, insights and good ideas and things about projects we're doing. And we all started sharing cat pictures last week. So we did a little collage of cat pictures, and people on LinkedIn were adding their #ProposalCats or #ProposalDogs to that, and that was quite fun. You could do some silly stuff as well.
Yes, Jon, 100%. So if you could ask your two pet cats 3 questions, what would they be?
On a scale of 0 to 10, how terrified are you of the baby? That would be 1, because they really can't work out this small thing that's kind of crawling around. Second one would probably be that so the cats stay in the house or in our back garden. They don't go off wandering the streets. But I guess it would be, what do you think's out there beyond the front door? Because they're forever looking out the front door and then being too scared to go. So yeah, what do you think is out there?
Right.
And then number 3 would probably be, where do you think we go? Because in normal circumstances we set off for a day or a few hours, or do they wonder? Do they care? Are they just glad that we're gone, so they've got peace and quiet in their house?
That's brilliant.
Lovely question.
That's amazing, Jon. So the last one, Jon. If you could pick a new first name, what would it be?
Oh goodness. I don't know. I'm quite happy with Jon, and in a funny way, I've had to do this. So, my full first name is Jonathan. That's what I was christened. And I chose, aged about 16, that I wanted to be known as Jon, not Jonathan. Partly because it was too much of a mouthful, and it sounded too serious and pompous and formal. I don't particularly like Jonathan as a name, so I chose Jon rather than Jonathan. So I think I've been through that of kind of already. So I know I'm ducking the question there, but it just struck me as you asked it that was something I kind of went through and decided that Jon was what worked. So now I'm only called Jonathan if my mother forgets, or if I go to a doctor's surgery or something, and they're Jonathan Williams, and it always puts me on the back foot and makes me feel very, very small and insecure. So yeah, please stick to Jon. Anyone listening to this, if you send me a note calling me Jonathan, I'll get very upset.
Thanks, Jon. That's brilliant. So, you have been so blessed with the team, with the family, Jon, with a successful business. So who are the people who have been the most influential in your life and career?
Well, I mean, I guess my parents, of course, who are, both fabulous people. If I think career-wise, we've talked about BJ Lownie, and I mentioned Steve Mullins, the kind of procurement guru. And I've they're both brilliant people, and they both bring, hugely insightful and strategic thinking, but then the ability to take that strategic thinking and turn it into the most pragmatic ways of doing things. And they're both wonderful company. They're both brilliant sounding boards. They're both people of absolute integrity who I trust absolutely. And I've been incredibly lucky to have these two kind of really close mentors and friends for 20 something years now. So yeah, BJ Lownie, Steve Mullins.
That's brilliant, Jon. And what's the best piece of advice you've received from whom?
Best piece of advice. Can I do a silly one and then I'll do a more serious one? The silly one, when I just moved out of kind of corporate life into consultancy, and joined PMMS, this procurement consultancy where we incubated the UK part of strategic proposals for the first 5 years. The first meeting I went to, one of their very senior negotiation skills consultants took me to one side and said, John, can I offer you one piece of advice based on all of my years as a consultant? And I thought, wow, he's going to tell me something incredibly profound. I don't know, always be generous to your fellow professionals, or always go the extra mile for your clients, or something. What is this man going to tell me? And he looked at me very solemnly and he said, choose one hotel chain, sign up for their loyalty scheme, and always stay with them. And honestly, as the best piece of advice, I spent 1,500 odd nights with Marriott and Starwood before them. And stayed, been upgraded to some amazing suites and had some wonderful experiences, had free stays on points in some gorgeous places, Kyoto we mentioned included. So that in a funny way, that's the best piece of advice I had. If you think of a more serious one, again, another of the PMMS consultants going back in time, a guy called David Webb, who was one of their kind of consultants. I first met him in my Barclays days. And those of us in the procurement team all had to go in individually and present to David about an upcoming negotiation. Mm. And I went in and talked about a deal I needed to strike with one of our hardware vendors for the current year's ban. I was buying PCs, servers, laptops, and so on. And I did all my research to go and talk to this esteemed coach and mentor. And I talked about our spend with the vendor concerned and the detail of the terms and conditions and what that meant in terms of pricing negotiations. And I dug out various pieces of benchmarking data and what competitors' pricing was. And I presented this wealth of information. And David just looked at me and went, what football team does their account manager support? And I went, I have no idea, David, and I have no idea why you're even asking the question. And that led into a debate about persuasion and influencing being about logic, but also being about emotion, and the importance of emotion and kind of relationships and so on. And he came back in about 2 weeks later, and I shoved a little note under the door of the room he was working in. It just said Wycombe Wanderers, which is a football team in the UK. But I think that that's a piece of advice that stuck with me, and actually is quite important when you're working on proposals. It's not just the logic of responding to the RFP and I want this specification in these locations and give me the CVs of your people and fill in the following pricing metrics. It's the Spice Girls question we often ask, tell me what they want, what they really, really want. Get under the skin of the client's real issues and requirements. So yeah, I'd pick that one if you want my kind of serious one.
Oh, perfect, John. So because we are all self-isolated, working from home, John, who haven't you seen or talked to in a long time and hope they're doing okay?
Funnily in isolation, lockdown, I think we talk to people perhaps more than we ever did before. So, every day brings with it a new sort of video conferencing app, or, whether it's Zoom, Big Marker that we use, all sorts of different ones. So in a funny way, I think we are all talking to one another more maybe than kind of we have done. It is, it's very frustrating not being able to spend more time with Benedict, my son. He lives with his mother, probably 50 miles away. Isn't able to go back to university for his summer term because the university is shut. So not actually physically spending time with Benedict is frustrating. Not being able to spend time with my parents who live up near Liverpool still, and they're in their late 70s, and they've been locked away with only one another for company for weeks now. So yeah, as soon as the lockdown finishes, it'll be Benedict and my parents who come first. And then there's so many people in the proposal profession. I would love to. Been going over to Nashville in May for Bid and Proposal Con. I hope that's going to be a huge success when it's rescheduled in September, although unfortunately I can't go because I've got existing APMP commitments in the UK to present at a couple of chapter meetings and run a couple of public foundation courses in, I think, Birmingham and Edinburgh that week. yeah, family would come first.
Well, thank you, John. So the last question, John. So what's something you're looking forward to in the future? What's next?
Getting out of lockdown and being able to go back to restaurants and being able to travel and so on. You know, we are in uncharted waters here, aren't we? None of us can tell what the world's going to be like in 2 months, 6 months, 2 years. So, you know, I've got another book I want to write about proposals. We've got a lot of really exciting initiatives going on in my team at the moment that we'll launch over the next couple of months. I think, you know, I hold on to a few things very dearly at times like this. The team I've got around me, the clients we work with, and trusting that, you know, they still see the value we bring even in difficult times, perhaps even more so in difficult times. A sense of, I think there's an onus on people in leadership roles in the corporate environment to continue to support this community of external providers in the market. As a bid and proposal profession, we have people who've happened to be spending time at the moment working in in-house roles, and there's this rich, thriving community of external providers, and I think that's part of the richness of our profession. And I really do hope that leaders in the in-house teams show some leadership and continue to champion the cause of some of those external providers, not just people like us, but the freelance consultants out there and so on, as times have got a little tougher all around, because that's the richness of the profession. I do think that there is a growing, you know, talk about APMP helping promote the sense of proposal management and bid management as professions. And I think there is an increasing realization at kind of senior levels in the organizations we work with that proposals done brilliantly are a remarkable source of competitive advantage. So I think, you know, if I look forward, it's let's get through some of these tough times. Let's use that time to stop and reflect and think. Sometimes for many of us, it's taking a little bit of a break from the run of the mill, spending more time with our families. And I'm sure we'll all come back really refreshed once the doors open again. But, you know, it's the most important thing at the moment is that people stay safe. These are stressful times for a lot of people and sad times for far too many people. So, you know, more than anything, I hope the people listening to this podcast will emerge the other side with their health and that of their family and friends intact.
That's beautifully said, John. So is there any part of your life or career, John, that we haven't touched that we can revisit before we close?
I think we've done a pretty comprehensive job, actually. You know, I do count myself very fortunate. I've taken deliberate decisions as to where I've gone with my career. You know, when I was at a kind of university, the very early days of my career, I only had two real career ambitions. One was to run a company, which I do, or the UK part of it. And the other was to find something that interested me enough and that I could be good enough at, that I could sort of travel the world talking about it, and people would fly me around the world to go and discuss my views. At that point, I had no idea what it was going to be. You know, no one grows up saying, I want to be a proposal professional. We all stumble into this in one way or another. And I've ticked those boxes. And, you know, now it's about continuing to help the team thrive and find new and cool things to do and just, you know, continue to have a huge amount of fun doing this.
That's brilliant, John. And I wish you all the success with that, John. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real privilege to have you with us at Scribble Talk. Wish you, family, Erin, you know, your son, Bernadette, and everybody around you and your team, all the good health and happiness and success. Please continue to inspire the bid and proposal industry colleagues and everybody around you, John. Look after yourself.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. As I say, what you're doing here, putting this kind of little vault of kind of interviews with people in our profession together, so that, you know, anyone can look at and draw inspiration, I hope, from the views of people who've been around the block a little bit. It's fabulous stuff, Bhaskar, and I really do give you huge credit for doing so, and thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Jon. Thanks for your time.
Stay safe, my friend. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Jon. Thanks a lot.
To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Please visit batchyscribble.com/podcast to listen to this episode and check out any of our other previously recorded episodes. If you've enjoyed today's interview, don't forget to subscribe, review, and share the Scribble Talk podcast. We hope you'll check out our next episode where we interview another industry expert and special guest. Until then, it's Ashley Kays,
Bhaskar Sundram,
signing off.